Hi everyone. Tonight we're standing right at the edge of daylight, watching it thin and disappear, as though someone is slowly lowering a dimmer on the world itself. You're still outdoors, and the last trace of the sun's warmth rests faintly on your skin, but you can already sense it fading. The sky doesn't turn dark instantly. It hesitates. Blue deepens into gray. Gray settles into something heavier. Then, almost without notice, night arrives. No lamps flicker on. No streetlights buzz to life. Darkness simply comes, complete and final. You probably wouldn't survive this easily. At least not comfortably. Because when the sun vanishes in the Middle Ages, it takes much more than light with it. It removes time, safety, productivity, and certainty. Night isn't a pause. It's a state you're required to endure. Before we go further, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, only if you truly enjoy this content. And while you're here, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, lower the lights and allow yourself to step fully into a world where night is neither decorative nor comforting, but absolute. It becomes clear quickly that medieval evenings are intentionally brief. People move with purpose. Footsteps quicken. Voices carry a sharper urgency. Animals are gathered closer. Doors are checked again. This isn't panic, it's habit. A well-established historical reality is that medieval life was organized around daylight rather than clocks. Work expanded and contracted with the seasons, but nightfall was never negotiable. You feel this shift physically before you fully process it mentally. Vision fails first. Colors dull, faces blur, and peripheral sight becomes unreliable. You realize how deeply modern life relies on constant light without ever questioning it. Here, light is a resource, not a certainty. Nearby, a dog barks once, then falls silent. Chickens have already settled, their soft sounds replaced by an uneasy stillness. Even the air feels heavier. Historians still debate whether medieval people feared darkness itself or simply treated it as a force demanding caution rather than bravery. Standing here, it seems likely it was both. As the final usable light drains away, the world tightens. Your vision shrinks to what's immediately ahead of you: your feet, the ground, the outline of a doorway. Beyond that is guesswork. Stars may appear, offering beauty but little guidance. Moonlight, when present, washes the world in silver, distorting depth and casting shadows that seem to move on their own. You head indoors as everyone does. Medieval nightlife is mostly indoor life. Homes are built for survival, not comfort. Thick walls, narrow openings, low ceilings. These features aren't decorative, they defend against cold, wind, and darkness. A lesser-known but well-documented detail is that many medieval windows were intentionally cut as narrow slits, not only for defense, but to reduce heat loss and control smoke once fires were lit. Inside, the change is abrupt. Outside was dim. Inside is something else entirely. Without fire, the room becomes a pocket of near-total darkness. Your eyes strain for edges, for shapes, for proof that the space still exists. You move carefully, guided more by memory than sight. Then the fire arrives. A spark, a hiss, a soft crackle. Suddenly, the room returns, partially. Fire doesn't light evenly. It creates small islands of visibility surrounded by shadow. Faces glow, then vanish as people move. Walls flicker in and out. The ceiling disappears altogether, lost to darkness and smoke. Fire becomes the center of the evening. It provides light, warmth, protection, and danger all at once. This is a widely accepted historical fact. Open hearths were central to medieval domestic life, especially after dark. What textbooks rarely convey is how mentally draining it is to depend on a single flame for so many purposes. Warmth reaches you, and your shoulders ease. The tension of the day loosens. At the same time, you can't stop watching the fire. No one can. Sparks leap. Embers shift. One mistake could turn shelter into disaster. Fire sustains, but it also threatens. As people gather near the hearth, conversation softens. Night reshapes voices. There's less shouting now, more murmuring. Words are chosen carefully because sound doesn't travel well in low light. Silence stretches longer between sentences. The pace slows. You notice another thing, the smell. Smoke clings to everything. Hair, clothing, skin. It settles into bedding, wood, and memory. This isn't the clean scent of a modern fireplace. It's damp wood, old ash, animal fat, and whatever else was burned that day. A historical detail that often surprises people is that medieval households sometimes burned dried animal dung when wood was scarce, particularly in treeless regions. The smell is unforgettable. Time behaves differently without artificial light. Evening isn't something to fill endlessly. There are no distractions waiting to be switched on. You don't scroll. You don't binge. You exist until sleep arrives. Historians continue to debate whether medieval people experience time as slower, or whether modern acceleration simply makes the past feel that way. Sitting here, watching the fire rise and fade, time thickens, almost like syrup. Outside, darkness presses against the walls. You're acutely aware of what you can't see: forest edges, empty roads, the possibility of strangers or animals, or nothing at all. Sometimes absence itself is the most unsettling thing. You listen. Night sharpens hearing. Every creak sounds deliberate. Every gust of wind feels like a presence. Medieval nights are noisy in small ways. Mice move. Rafters settle. Someone coughs across the room. Far off, a bell marks a prayer hour you don't yet understand. There's no sharp line between evening and night. One slips into the other gently. Eventually, someone yawns. Another shifts closer to the hearth. The flame is adjusted, lowered, coaxed to last a little longer. Candles, if present at all, aren't lit casually. They're saved and used carefully. Light is money, and money disappears quickly. As your body relaxes, a quiet realization sets in. Once you lie down, once the fire dims, once the room returns to darkness, there is no escape until morning. No switch. No override. Only darkness, patience, and whatever thoughts surface when there's nothing left to see. And without ceremony, medieval night fully begins. Darkness deepens and sound changes with it. During the day, noise spreads freely. Tools strike wood and stone. Voices carry across open ground. Animals make themselves known constantly. At night, all of this contracts. Sound no longer moves outward, it turns inward. You become aware not of what's loud, but of what's gone. The village exhales. That's the best way to describe it. Doors shut. Shutters are drawn tight. Final conversations fade into murmurs. What remains isn't silence exactly, but a cautious quiet. You hear wind moving through uneven thatch. You hear the distant cough of someone who didn't quite escape the cold. You hear your own breathing more clearly than you'd prefer. A well-documented historical fact is that medieval communities discouraged noise after nightfall, not for politeness, but for survival. Sound drew attention. The tension brought danger. Without light, you couldn't easily tell whether a noise was harmless or a threat. The safest principle is to make as little noise as possible yourself. Quiet becomes a kind of defense. You feel this discipline settle into your body. Your posture adjusts. Movements become intentional. Each step is placed with care. Even the fire is handled cautiously, encouraged rather than forcefully fed. When pushed too hard, flames crackle sharply and draw attention. Outside, the night does not feel empty. It feels occupied. The darkness seems alert, almost attentive. You begin to understand that much of medieval fear of night was not centered on monsters, but on uncertainty, on not knowing who or what might be nearby. Roads after sunset belong to ambiguity. A lone traveler could be a pilgrim, a courier, a thief, or something more dangerous. Historians continue to debate whether crime actually increased at night in medieval towns, or whether people simply believed it did because visibility was limited. Sitting here, you sense that perception alone would have been enough. Animals respond differently after dark. Dogs curl closer to doorways. Livestock shift and snort in their pens. Rats grow bolder. You catch the faint scratching of movement behind walls and beneath floorboards. A minor but well-documented detail is that medieval homes were never fully sealed. Small gaps were unavoidable. Night belonged to creatures small enough to take advantage of them. As the fire is lowered, the air cools quickly. Heat does not linger as it does in modern buildings. Stone and packed earth absorb warmth slowly and release it just as slowly. Wood, by contrast, loses heat almost at once. You pull your clothing tighter, noticing that cold finds ankles and wrists first. When conversation occurs, its tone changes. People speak in shorter sentences. Stories are told more quietly, often familiar ones repeated many times. Known words offer comfort in the dark. There is little desire for novelty. Night is not the moment for surprises. Faces look different by firelight. Features stretch and compress. Eyes reflect the flame and appear brighter than they truly are. Shadows exaggerate expressions. Someone ordinary by day appears severe. Another seems gentler. Fire reshapes people just as much as it reshapes the room. This is where superstition takes hold. Shapes shift. Sounds lack clear sources. It becomes easy to assign meaning where none exists. Medieval folklore thrived during these hours not because people were irrational, but because their sensory information was incomplete. When vision fails, the mind fills gaps quickly. Scholars still debate whether medieval people genuinely believed every spirit and omen recorded in folklore, or whether these stories served as frameworks for anxiety and danger. In this dim light, belief feels less like a decision and more like a natural reaction to uncertainty. A bell sounds in the distance, not loud, but steady, marking a religious hour. Time at night is measured differently. Without clocks or artificial light, communities rely on sound. Bells divide darkness into manageable portions. They reassure you that order still exists, that the world remains observed. Nearby, someone murmurs a prayer softly enough to blend with the embers' crackle. Religion does not pause simply because people rest. Night carries its own obligations, spiritual if not physical. Gradually, conversation fades, not suddenly, but slowly. Pauses stretch longer. No one rushes to fill them. Silence becomes acceptable, even welcome. You realize how exhausting darkness can be. Your eyes ache from constant effort. Your body feels heavier. This is not boredom, but a different rhythm taking control. The fire is allowed to sink further. Flames shrink into glowing coals. Light draws inward, collapsing toward the hearth. Corners disappear. The room simplifies into warmth at the center and darkness everywhere else. You begin to understand that medieval night is not dramatic. It does not announce itself loudly or threaten outright. It presses quietly but persistently. It asks you to slow down, to listen more than speak, to accept that not everything can be seen or resolved until morning. So you remain still, wrapped in quiet, letting darkness complete what sunset began. As the night deepens, you notice how deliberately these homes are designed for darkness. Medieval houses do not resist the night. They accept it, accommodate it, and in many ways work alongside it. You stand within a space never intended to be bright after sunset. It was meant to be enclosed. The walls are thick, sometimes surprisingly so, stone, packed earth, heavy timber. At night, these materials serve a single purpose, and it is not comfort. They slow loss. Heat escapes reluctantly. Cold enters just as slowly. This approach to building was common across much of medieval Europe. Wealth made little difference. Even modest homes followed the same logic, using rougher materials. Windows, if present at all, are small and awkwardly placed. They sit high or narrow, more suggestion than opening. During daylight, they admit just enough light for work. At night, they offer almost nothing. Glass is rare and costly. Openings might be covered with oiled cloth or animal horn, blurring the outside world into a dull haze even before darkness falls. Once night arrives, the window ceases to be an asset and becomes a weakness, a point where cold and sound can slip inside. The ceiling feels low. Smoke stains darken the beams overhead. The roof seems to press downward, not physically, but mentally. This is not a space designed for pacing or movement. It encourages stillness, sitting, lying down, conserving energy. There is a quiet intimacy to it. Darkness reduces space. Rooms that feel sufficient during the day feel crowded at night. People sit closer not only for warmth, but because there is nowhere else to go. The edges of the room have disappeared. Only the center remains. Records from the period make one thing clear: medieval interiors were rarely silent in the modern sense. Even at night, houses creaked, settled, and breathed. Wood contracts as temperatures drop. Thatch rustles softly overhead. Somewhere, moisture drips. The building itself is impossible to ignore. It feels alive around you. Less often discussed is how adaptable these spaces were. A single room might function as kitchen, workshop, sleeping area, and storage. At night, all of these roles collapse into one shared purpose: shelter. Tools are moved aside. Food is secured. Bedding is spread wherever space exists near warmth. The house transforms, not by altering its structure, but by changing priorities. You feel the floor beneath you, packed dirt in poorer homes, rough planks in wealthier ones, as cold rises steadily upward. Straw, rushes, or simple mats interrupt that cold only partially. This is why benches, stools, and beds are raised whenever possible. Elevation matters. Even a small distance from the ground can mean the difference between manageable cold and deep, aching chill. One detail appears repeatedly in household records. People slept fully clothed far more often than modern assumptions suggest. Not due to lack of privacy or modesty, but because undressing meant losing heat. Layers stayed on. Cloaks doubled as blankets. Hoods were pulled tight even in bed. The idea of separate sleepwear would have felt impractical here. Firelight reveals how the walls are used. Books hold tools. Shelves support everyday items. Nothing is decorative. Everything must justify its place. At night, unnecessary objects become hazards, things you might stumble over or knock into flame. Order is not about appearance. It is about survival. You reach out and touch the wall. It is cool. Even close to the hearth, stone absorbs warmth slowly and releases it reluctantly. By morning it will still be cold. Medieval builders understood this balance clearly. Thick walls shielded people from weather extremes, but they rarely felt truly warm. Modern historians still debate whether these homes felt oppressive or reassuring. Some suggest that familiarity softened the darkness, allowing people to feel secure within heavy walls. Others argue that constant shadow and smoke created ongoing, low-level stress that never fully disappeared. Sitting here now, you sense both responses at the same time. The house protects you from the outside world, yet it also confines you with your own thoughts. Smell becomes stronger the longer you remain still. Smoke settles on every surface. Dampness rises slowly from the floor. Animals, even when kept outdoors, leave their presence behind. Food odors linger at night, unchecked by fresh air. The house smells inhabited, not cleaned. You begin to notice how little distance exists between human life and the structure itself. The walls function less as barriers and more as membranes. You hear voices from nearby homes, muted but familiar. A cough. A restless infant. Night connects the community through shared exposure. The house creaks again, louder than before. You pause instinctively. Is it wind, wood, or something shifting unseen? Certainty takes time. You wait. The sound does not return. Your body loosens slightly. This pattern repeats many times each night. Tension, pause, release. You realize that medieval homes encourage patience. They do not reward fast movement or impulsive behavior. Everything requires effort. Even standing up demands intention. You memorize routes through the room so you can move without sight. You learn where the hearth ends and darkness begins. As the fire dims further, the room contracts once more. Shadows spread. Objects fade into suggestion. The house feels less like a building and more like a shell protecting fragile warmth. Here, in darkness shaped by thick walls and low ceilings, you understand that medieval people did not defeat night. They negotiated with it, one enclosed space at a time. Fire becomes the quiet center of everything. Not through drama or ritual, but through necessity. As the room darkens and edges vanish, your focus returns repeatedly to the hearth. It is no longer just part of the house. It becomes the house, at least during the hours that matter most. You sit close enough to feel warmth on your shins. Too close and it burns. Too far, and cold returns immediately. There is a narrow range where comfort exists, and everyone learns to recognize it instinctively. Positions around the fire shift constantly. A foot moves forward. A shoulder turns away. Heat is uneven and unpredictable, and you adapt without conscious effort. Household records that survive make one thing clear: fire shaped medieval evenings more than any written schedule could. When the fire burned strongly, people stayed awake. When it weakened, bodies began to yield to sleep. Flame controlled time. The fire is never left unattended. Someone always watches it, even half aware. Eyes return to it repeatedly. Embers are adjusted. A log is shifted. Sparks are suppressed. Fire sustains life, but it demands attention. One careless moment could lead to disaster, especially in tightly packed settlements. There is a quiet intimacy in this shared responsibility. Everyone depends on the same flame. Children are warned away. Experienced hands manage it. Knowledge passes quietly, learned through repetition rather than instruction. No one needs to be told that fire is dangerous. You feel it directly. Smoke rises slowly and persistently. It does not travel cleanly upward. It lingers, spreads, then eventually escapes through a roof opening or a crude chimney, if one exists at all. Many homes lack proper chimneys. Smoke simply fills the upper space before drifting out over time. Eyes sting. Throats itch. This discomfort is so common that it barely draws notice. Medical writings from the period reveal a lesser-known reality. Constant smoke exposure was so widespread that it shaped health in subtle ways. Chronic coughing, irritated eyes, and shortness of breath were accepted as normal, not problems to solve. Night, with its longer hours near the fire, made these effects more noticeable. Firelight distorts perception. Faces glow, then fade. Hands appear larger, then smaller. Shadows stretch and collapse as flames shift. You see how stories could grow in this setting. Fire animates the room. Still objects seem to move. Moving objects appear alive. Historians disagree on how often storytelling actually occurred around the hearth on ordinary nights. Some believe evenings were filled with tales, songs, and shared memories. Others argue that exhaustion often limited conversation more than imagination. Sitting here, you sense that both views are accurate, depending on the night, the season, and the people present. Tonight feels subdued. The day has taken its toll. Words come slowly. Someone begins a familiar story, then lets it fade. No one urges them to continue. Silence returns, broken only by the soft crack of burning wood. Fire also governs scent. Resin from logs, old ash, grease from earlier cooking. These smells layer together and settle into fabric and hair. They are not unpleasant, just constant. Even sleep will not fully escape them. You notice how tools gather near the hearth as night falls. Pots are stacked closer. Water is kept within reach. Anything needed quickly is placed where light remains. The rest of the room fades into irrelevance. Darkness claims it entirely. A quiet calculation takes place now. How long should the fire last? Too much fuel wastes resources. Too little, and the room becomes unbearable before morning. Fuel is valuable. Wood must be gathered, cut, and carried. Each log represents work already done. In some regions, especially where forests are limited, people burn alternatives. Peat, dried grasses, even animal dung. These fuels behave differently, producing varied heat and smoke. You notice the difference immediately. Some provide steady warmth. Others smolder, filling the room with sharp, lingering odor. Decisions made earlier in the day shape comfort now. Scholars still debate how warm medieval homes truly were at night. Some suggest they could be surprisingly comfortable when managed carefully. Others argue that constant cold was unavoidable. Your experience points to a middle ground. Warmth exists, but only in small areas and only for limited periods. As the fire settles into glowing coals, its nature changes. Light softens. Heat becomes less intense. This is when bodies relax most. Muscles loosen. Breathing slows. The fire no longer demands attention. It allows rest. Someone gently stirs the embers, just enough to keep them alive. Flames rise briefly, then retreat again. This simple action feels ceremonial, though it is entirely practical. It signals the shift from evening into true night. The fire will not last until dawn. Everyone understands this. You accept it because there is no alternative. The loss of light brings urgency, and you feel it settle into your body as evening moves toward full darkness. Tasks that felt optional earlier now feel essential. There is a quiet rush, not frantic but deliberate. Night is approaching, and certain things must be completed before it fully takes hold. You move with intention. Hands work faster. Conversations shorten. Everyone knows what remains to be done because these routines have been repeated countless times. Food must be secured, tools stored, animals checked, water drawn if it has not already been collected. Darkness punishes carelessness. Household manuals and legal records make it clear that medieval evenings were organized around this final period of activity. The last light of day was valuable and never wasted casually. People learned to judge how much could realistically be done before visibility failed. Experience taught restraint. You notice memory replacing sight. You reach for objects without looking, guided by habit. The knife is always in the same place. The bowl always nearby. This reliance on memory becomes natural. Homes are arranged for darkness as much as for daylight. One detail often overlooked is how communal this final rush can be. In smaller households, everyone contributes. Children carry kindling. Older hands check doors. In larger homes, tasks are divided more formally, but the shared awareness remains. Nightfall is a collective deadline. There is also careful judgment involved. Some tasks are intentionally postponed. Mending can wait. Cleaning can wait. Anything that risks injury without proper light is delayed until morning. This restraint helps people survive. You feel tension ease slightly as each task is finished. A latch clicks shut. A pot is covered. A door is barred. These sounds bring reassurance. They signal readiness. Historians debate how stressful this daily transition truly was. Some argue it created constant, low-level anxiety. Others suggest routine turned urgency into familiarity. Standing here now, you sense that repetition has softened the pressure. The rush remains, but it is familiar. Outside, darkness deepens quickly. Color disappears entirely. What remains is shape and movement, both unreliable. You avoid staring too long. Night beyond the threshold feels vast. Inside, final adjustments continue. Bedding is placed near the warmest area. Extra layers are set within reach. Footwear is arranged carefully so it can be found again in the morning. These details matter more now than they did during daylight. Many accounts note a practical habit. People often ate their final meal earlier than modern schedules would suggest to avoid handling knives and hot food in poor light. When meals occurred later, they were simple and required little preparation. As activity briefly increases, smells shift again: food, straw, damp wool. These scents mix and linger through the night, held by closed doors and still air. You feel the pace slow once more. The rush cannot continue. Energy is limited, especially after a full day of work. As tasks conclude, bodies settle. Shullet's purpose is not to erase night, only to make the transition easier. Eventually, darkness will fully reclaim the room, and you will lie down with whatever warmth remains trapped in clothing and blankets. For now, you stay close to the fading glow, letting it hold back the night a little longer. Light becomes something you begin to measure unconsciously, not by brightness, but by cost. As the fire fades and shadows return, you become aware of how little illumination remains and how carefully it must be used. This is where candles enter the story, not as symbols of comfort or romance, but as deliberate choices. Candles are not common objects here. They are valuable, slow to produce, and typically saved for moments that genuinely require them. Wax candles, especially those made from beeswax, are highly valued. They burn more cleanly and provide brighter light than tallow candles. However, beeswax requires time, expertise, and well-maintained hives to produce. As a result, only wealthier households or religious institutions can afford to use them regularly. Most people depend on tallow candles made from animal fat. These burn unevenly, create more smoke, and give off a noticeable odor that lingers long after the flame is extinguished. You observe as a candle is lit. Slowly and with care, the wick catches. Light appears, but only faintly. This single flame does not illuminate the entire room. Instead, it forms a small area of visibility. Faces closest to the light become distinct. Everything beyond that remains unclear. It is well documented that medieval households tightly controlled candle use. Candles were not lit simply because night had fallen. They were used for specific purposes: mending, eating, prayer, or moving safely through spaces that would otherwise be hazardous. Once the task ended, the candle was put out without delay. You begin to notice how people act differently around candlelight compared to firelight. Candles feel delicate and require caution. A sudden movement could tip one over. A loose sleeve could catch fire. Candle light encourages slower movement and quiet focus. One detail often missing from popular accounts of medieval life is how frequently candle remnants were reused. Stubs were kept. Melted wax was collected. New candles were made from old remains. Nothing was discarded. Light, once consumed, could not be recovered. The smell of tallow is unmistakable, warm, fatty, and slightly sharp. It clings to clothing and lingers in the air. Over time, people become used to it. At night, when other scents fade, it becomes more noticeable. This smell becomes part of the experience of evening. You realize that candle light changes how faces appear. It is steadier than firelight but dimmer. Shadows are sharper. Expressions appear more fixed. The room feels flatter, less animated. Fire flickers and moves. The candle remains still. Historians debate how much reading actually occurred at night in medieval homes. Some evidence suggests that literate individuals did read or write by candlelight. Other sources argue that limited illumination and eye strain made such activities uncommon. Sitting here now, you understand why. The flame flickers just enough to make prolonged focus tiring. Candles also define social boundaries. Those who control light also control activity. The head of the household decides when candles are lit and when they are extinguished. Children quickly learn that light signals permission. When the candle goes out, the day ends. In religious settings, candlelight serves a different function. It marks sacred time. It accompanies prayer. It signifies presence rather than practicality. In homes, however, its meaning is direct and urgent. Light means safety. Darkness means danger. You notice how shadows gather behind furniture and along walls. Candle light cannot reach corners. It reveals only what stands directly in front of it. This limited visibility increases awareness of what remains hidden. You move carefully. You begin to memorize the room again, relying on memory instead of sight. The flame shortens gradually over time. Wax drips slowly, forming hardened shapes at the base. Each drip feels like a reminder that light is being consumed. No one comments on it, but everyone notices. Eventually, a quiet decision is made. The candle is extinguished. Darkness returns instantly, more complete than before. Your eyes struggle to adjust. The room feels suddenly larger and emptier. Scholars continue to debate whether medieval people feared darkness more after using candlelight or whether the contrast made darkness more familiar. When the light disappears, you feel a brief moment of unease. Then your senses adjust. Darkness resumes its familiar presence. Without candle or fire, night fully asserts itself. You hear more. You feel more. You smell more. Light, for all its usefulness, dulls certain senses. Its absence sharpens them. You lie back knowing that candles will not return unless something demands them. Firelight is gone. Candlelight is gone. What remains is night in its simplest form. Doors relax. Breathing becomes steady. The fire is adjusted one final time, not to brighten the room, but to ensure it will not flare unexpectedly. Safety matters more than comfort. Someone spreads the embers thin. Someone else checks that sparks cannot escape. You notice how people avoid unnecessary movement. Now, every movement involves danger. A slip, a poorly placed hand. Injury after dark is far riskier than injury during the day. Assistance takes longer to arrive. Vision is reduced. Pain feels more intense when its cause cannot be clearly seen. There is also a lingering sense that something remains undone. Perhaps an item was overlooked. A tool left behind. A door not fully closed. Yet questioning these details only drains energy. Once darkness fully arrives, the day is understood to be finished. Scholars disagree on how strictly people followed this boundary and how often they continued working despite the risks. Some records suggest necessity sometimes required it. Other sources point to strong social expectations discouraging nighttime labor. Your own judgment favors restraint. Darkness feels like a limit rather than an opportunity. As the last signs of activity disappear, the house shifts into a new condition. It no longer feels like a place of work, but a shelter. Sound fades. Motion becomes infrequent. Night has been recognized. You lie down knowing the day has ended quietly, without ritual, simply through acceptance. That brings a sense of ease. Morning will return with light. Until then, rest takes precedence. Activity gives way to calm, and night settles fully into its role. With tasks complete and movement slowed, your focus turns inward. Darkness encourages this. When there is little to see and even less to do, the mind fills the silence on its own. Night in the Middle Ages is more than a physical state. It is also psychological. You remain still, listening. Small noises feel louder now that distractions have faded. A board creaks. Something shifts beyond the walls. Wind presses against the structure, then withdraws. Each sound raises the same quiet question. Is this ordinary, or something unfamiliar? This is where belief finds fertile ground. Not because people lack logic, but because logic depends on information, and information is scarce in the dark. Many medieval tales of spirits, wandering souls, and unseen presences grow out of nighttime experience. The world feels less stable when it cannot be seen. Religious writings and sermons from the period show that night was often described as a vulnerable time for the soul. Darkness was linked to temptation, fear, and disorder. These ideas shaped behavior as much as religious doctrine. People were urged to stay indoors, to pray, and to guard their thoughts as carefully as their homes. You feel that restraint settle into the space. When conversation occurs, it stays familiar and measured. There is less laughter now, fewer playful disputes. Night is not meant for testing ideas. It is meant for comfort. A recurring detail appears across various folk traditions. Certain actions were believed to invite misfortune if performed after sunset. Whistling indoors, spinning thread, trimming nails. While these beliefs differ by region, they share a central idea. Night is seen as a time when boundaries weaken and actions may have unintended results. Historians do not agree on how literally these ideas were taken. Some suggest they served as practical guidance presented as superstition. Avoid spinning at night because dim light causes errors. Avoid sharp tools because injuries are harder to manage. Others argue genuine fear was involved. Sitting here now, the difference feels unimportant. The result is the same. Night restricts behavior. You become aware of how imagination changes in darkness. Thoughts move more easily toward memory and concern. A familiar face now gone. A debt unresolved. An illness without cure. Darkness allows these thoughts space to expand. Religious routines provide structure against this pull. Soft prayers are spoken, sometimes quietly, sometimes in silence. Repeated words steady the mind. Bells heard earlier remind you that others are awake as well. In separate houses, separate rooms. This shared practice makes the night feel less isolating. You notice how shadows lengthen and alter the space. A hanging garment resembles a person until examined closely. A pile of tools appears unfamiliar. The mind supplies details where sight fails. This is not fear itself, but increased awareness. Legal records from the period suggest many nighttime accusations involved things heard or seen imperfectly. A sound, a shape, movement at the edge of vision. Darkness reduces certainty, and uncertainty invites suspicion. You adjust your position carefully, seeking ease. The movement feels deliberate. Even resting requires attention. You do not stretch fully. You avoid sudden motion. The body learns control. Outside, night continues its quiet activity. Owls call. Insects move through the grass. Animals hidden during the day now claim their time. You share the darkness with them, whether you choose to or not. Scholars debate whether medieval people slept more deeply or more lightly than people today. Some believe physical exhaustion led to heavy rest. Others argue constant alertness prevented full relaxation. Your own experience suggests a balance. Sleep comes, but it is easily broken. As your thoughts slow, you notice your breathing. It sounds louder in the stillness. You attend to it as you did the fire earlier, as something vital that must be sustained. You think of morning, of returning light, of the bell that will signal it. That expectation brings reassurance. Night feels less burdensome when it is understood as temporary. Gradually, imagination loosens its hold. Thoughts lose their sharpness. Sounds blend together. The room returns to simple sensation. Warmth. Pressure. Darkness remains, but it no longer presses so closely. You have adapted. Night has done what it always does. It has narrowed the world until rest becomes the most sensible response. And so you release yourself, trusting the walls, the habits, and the promise of dawn to hold you until light returns. Sleep does not arrive suddenly. It never truly does here. Instead, it approaches slowly, like mist spreading across a field. You remain still, eyes closed, but awareness persists. The room does not vanish simply because you cannot see it. You sense the presence of others nearby. The faint warmth where bodies rest close. The gentle settling of the structure around you. This form of sleep feels unfamiliar. It is lighter and broken into parts. You drift off, then return to awareness without concern. This cycle repeats and it feels normal. For medieval people, this pattern is familiar. Night is not a single, continuous period of rest. Written accounts from the time suggest sleep often occurred in two main phases. People rested deeply for several hours, woke briefly, then slept again until morning. This pattern appears across regions and social groups, indicating it was common, shaped by darkness itself. You wake naturally after some time. Not startled. Not uneasy. Simply awake. The fire has long since faded. The room remains dark, but your eyes adjust more quickly now. Shapes are faintly visible. The quality of night has changed. It feels quieter and more settled. Others are awake as well. You hear straw shift. A quiet cough. Someone murmurs softly, perhaps a prayer, perhaps words spoken to occupy the silence. This waking period is not seen as a problem. It is expected. Devotional texts suggest this middle portion of the night was often used for reflection or prayer. With no demands and few distractions, the mind turns inward. Night encourages contemplation. Whether invited or not, you notice how calm this moment feels. The earlier sense of uncertainty has softened. Darkness feels less threatening now that you have lived within it for hours. The mind adjusts. Some people wake briefly. If embers still glow, they tend the fire. They step outside to relieve themselves. They check on animals or fasten doors once more. These actions are slow and deliberate, guided more by memory than by sight. Modern scholars disagree on how common these midnight routines actually were. Some suggest they occurred only in certain homes or regions. Others believe they were widespread enough to influence language and daily customs. Sitting awake at this hour feels natural rather than strange. You listen to the night beyond the walls. It sounds different than before. There are fewer sharp noises and more constant ones. Wind, distant animals. The outside world seems to have settled into a steady rhythm. This pause between sleeps brings an unusual clarity. Thoughts feel less crowded. Concerns that felt heavy earlier now seem distant. You think about the coming day, but without urgency. Morning will arrive in its own time. You notice your body. Muscles relaxed by rest. Breathing slow and even. The cold remains, but it is tolerable. You pull your cloak closer without fully waking. A rarely mentioned detail appears in some household records. Couples often use this waking period to speak quietly or share intimacy. Night provided a different kind of privacy, not isolation, but freedom from daytime demands. Gradually, sleepiness returns. Not abruptly, but softly. Your eyelids grow heavy. The mind loosens its grip. You sink back into sleep, deeper than before. Dreams arrive more easily now. They are shaped by darkness and by familiar stories. Forests, shadows, bells, known fears and comforts blend together. Night feeds imagination even as the body rests. There is uncertainty about how dreams were understood. Some believed they carried meaning or warnings. Others saw them as fleeting images. Either way, dreams felt closer to waking life than they often do now. Without artificial light or bright mornings, the boundary between sleep and wakefulness was softer. You stir again before dawn. Not fully awake, just aware. The room feels different, cooler, still. Night is thinning somewhere far away. A bell rings faintly but clearly. It does not announce daylight yet, but it promises it. The night is loosening its hold. You rest in that knowledge. Darkness has not overcome you. It has simply shared itself with you, hour by hour, breath by breath. Soon morning will come, not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily as it always does. You drift, waiting. Cold makes itself known long before dawn. It does not arrive suddenly or loudly. It creeps in. You feel it first at the edges of your body where heat escapes most easily. Fingers, toes, the tip of your nose. Even in sleep, the body senses these shifts and responds without fully waking. The room feels heavier now, as if the air has settled during the long dark hours. Whatever warmth the fire once gave has been absorbed by walls and floor, leaving only memory. Stone and earth return nothing willingly. You shift instinctively, drawing your limbs inward. The movement requires no thought. Medieval life teaches efficiency. Any unnecessary motion wastes heat. Curling inward becomes instinct. Surviving accounts make it clear that nighttime cold was one of the most constant challenges of daily life. Even in milder regions, temperatures dropped sharply after sunset. Without modern insulation, people relied on layers, shared warmth, and endurance. You feel the bedding beneath you, straw, wool, rough fabric that scratches slightly but traps air. Blankets are heavy, not soft. Their weight is deliberate. It presses warmth inward and limits movement. Comfort here is practical, not indulgent. A detail that surprises many appears often in estate records. Several people frequently shared one bed. Not just couples or families, but servants, apprentices, even travelers. Privacy mattered less than survival. Bodies close together produced heat more reliably than any blanket. You sense others nearby. Breathing, a quiet movement, a sigh. These sounds are reassuring. Warmth is shared, but so is vulnerability. No one sleeps fully alone unless necessary. Historians disagree on how well medieval bodies adapted to cold. Some argue constant exposure strengthened resilience. Others believe ongoing cold stress damaged health. Lying here, both seem true. The body adapts, but it never forgets discomfort. Your breath fogs faintly when you exhale deeply. This is normal. Many accounts describe visible breath indoors during winter nights. The house protects from wind and snow, but not from temperature. You pull your cloak tighter beneath your chin. Clothing is rarely removed for sleep. Every layer matters. Shoes may remain on. Hats are pulled low. Undressing would feel wasteful. Cold sharpens some senses while dulling others. Pressure and weight feel clearer. Texture matters more than warmth. Rough wool, smooth wood, the faint prick of straw. These sensations keep you grounded. Outside, the night continues to cool. Frost may be forming. Dew settles and freezes quietly. By morning, the ground will be stiff. The body senses this change without seeing it. Some monastic writings describe cold as spiritually useful. Discomfort kept the mind alert, discouraged excess, encouraged humility. Whether common or not, this belief reflects acceptance. Cold was not an enemy to defeat, only a condition to manage. You find a position that balances warmth and circulation. Too tight, and limbs ache. Too loose, and heat escapes. This balance is learned slowly. Sleep now comes lightly. Cold interrupts deeper rest, pulling you briefly toward awareness before letting go. The pattern is familiar. It causes no alarm. It simply exists. Some wake fully and add another layer. Others move closer to those beside them. These adjustments happen quietly. Everyone understands the need. Scholars disagree on how much sleep was lost to cold. Some nights were harsher. Seasons, weather, and resources all mattered. Sleep may have been less about length and more about persistence. Rest arrived in fragments, but it arrived. You listened to the house responding to temperature. Wood contracts with a sharp creak. Thatch rustles softly. These sounds are familiar. They are part of the house settling into night. Your thoughts slow. Cold narrows focus. It limits wandering ideas. The mind turns practical, then quiet. Staying warm becomes the only concern. Eventually the body finds a workable rhythm. Breathing steadies. Muscles relax as much as they can. The cold remains, but it no longer demands attention. Somewhere far off, a rooster stirs too early, then quiets again. Dawn is not ready. You remain where you are, layered and surrounded by others doing the same. The night has tested you with cold, and you have adapted, as people always have. Morning will bring movement and a different kind of warmth. For now, endurance is enough. You rest, waiting for light, allowing the cold to exist without resistance. Warmth, when it appears at all, is shared. You understand this now. As bodies settle closer in the dark, space becomes a resource like light or fuel. No one wastes it. Beds are not wide, private platforms meant for one sleeper. They are compact structures designed to trap heat, not to spread people apart. You sleep close to others, near enough to sense movement through the bedding. A shift in weight, a change in breathing. At first, this nearness feels unusual. Modern habits expect personal space. Here, space is a disadvantage. Empty gaps invite cold to settle. Bodies gathered together form a shared warmth that blankets alone cannot provide. Household accounts and personal correspondence show that shared sleeping was widespread in medieval life. Families slept together. Servants shared beds. Travelers were given room beside strangers. This was not considered improper. It was sensible. Night required cooperation. You notice how sleeping positions adjust without discussion. Backs turn inward. Knees draw close, shoulders line up. People arrange themselves like parts of a pattern, fitting together to reduce exposed skin. This coordination is silent but familiar. Privacy, as you define it today, does not exist in the same way. Curtains or screens may divide beds in wealthier homes, but even there, warmth comes first. In simpler dwellings, there is no division at all. Darkness removes social divisions as thoroughly as it removes light. One detail that often surprises modern readers appears repeatedly in legal and moral writings. Sharing a bed was not automatically linked to intimacy. Sleeping beside someone implied nothing beyond necessity. The culture clearly separated closeness for survival from closeness by choice. You feel the steady rhythm of another person's breathing and begin to match it without thinking. Breaths slow, bodies settle, heat gathers gradually and then holds. The cold withdraws just enough to be manageable. Historians debate whether this constant proximity strengthened relationships or simply reflected hardship. Some argue that shared sleep encouraged trust and familiarity. Others suggest it left little room for solitude or emotional distance. Lying here, both impressions seem true. The presence of others offers comfort, but it also removes protection. Smell is unavoidable. Smoke, human warmth. These scents blend and remain. They are not evaluated. They simply exist. Night leaves no way to avoid them. Children sleep easily in this setting. They are accustomed to it from birth. They curl naturally toward adults, seeking warmth without hesitation. Adults adjust without complaint. Everyone gains from the added heat. You become aware of how still people try to remain. Movement disturbs the delicate balance of warmth. A sudden turn lets cold air slip in. People learn to move slowly, signaling change with gentle pressure rather than sharp motion. Beds themselves are more basic than expected. Wooden frames, ropes or boards supporting a mattress filled with straw, feathers, or scraps. Over time, these materials compress, forming hollows shaped by repeated use. Each bed holds the memory of its sleepers. During colder seasons, extra layers are added: cloaks, spare blankets, even clothing spread over the top. Everything serves a purpose. Nothing exists purely for appearance. Scholars are uncertain about how restful such crowded sleep truly was. Some believe shared beds caused frequent disturbance. Others suggest that shared warmth improved rest despite interruptions. Your experience suggests that sleep arrives in stages. Light sleep, deeper rest, waking, then settling again. You feel a hand move nearby, careful not to wake you. Someone pulls a blanket higher. Another shifts position. These actions are quiet and deliberate. The night teaches restraint. The house itself seems to respond to this closeness. Sounds soften. Even the creak of wood feels subdued. The room seems to pause with you. At times, thoughts turn to the vulnerability of this arrangement. If danger came, fire, intrusion, escape would be difficult. Yet fear does not dominate. Familiarity dulls worry. This is the normal order of things. Court records show that nighttime conflicts sometimes arose from shared sleeping spaces. An elbow out of place, a blanket taken, a small offense. Close quarters amplify minor tensions, but they also settle them quickly. There is little room for resentment in the dark. As the hours pass, warmth stabilizes. The body relaxes further. Muscles loosen. Breathing deepens. The cold fades into the background. Dreams return, shaped by closeness. You dream of groups, of shared paths, of being surrounded. These images feel less threatening than they might alone. Toward morning, bodies slowly shift apart. The harshest cold has passed. Heat has been preserved. The need for contact eases. You sense the change without fully waking. Space returns gradually. Night loosens its hold. Shared warmth has carried you through another span of darkness. Not alone, not entirely at ease, but alive, sufficiently rested, and prepared for what follows. By now, your senses have adjusted so completely to the night that you almost forget how different it felt when darkness first fell. What stands out most is not sight, but smell. Night sharpens scent in ways daylight never does. Without wind or movement, every odor lingers, layering quietly over the last. The house smells inhabited. Smoke hangs in the air, not fresh, but as a trace from long hours near the hearth. It clings to hair, fabric, and skin. Even breathing feels textured, as if the air itself holds memory. There is the smell of dampness rising from the floor, especially in homes close to the ground. Packed earth or stone releases moisture slowly through the night. It does not drip, it simply persists, cool and steady. This scent blends with straw and wool, with old wood and stored food. Animals add their presence even when they are not inside. Livestock kept nearby leave traces that drift inward. Chickens, goats, cattle. Their warmth and waste shape the nighttime air of entire communities. Medieval life rarely separates human space from animal space. You notice how quickly you stop reacting to these smells. They become background rather than distraction. The nose learns what to ignore, just as the eyes learn to adjust to low light. Comfort here is not about cleanliness. It is about what is familiar. Sound behaves the same way. Earlier, every noise seemed important. Now the house has taught you which sounds matter. A mouse under the floor barely registers. The steady breathing nearby feels reassuring rather than disruptive. You hear the occasional cough, dry and hollow, traveling easily through the still air. Respiratory illness was common, and night often worsens symptoms. Cold air and smoke irritated lungs already strained by years of labor and exposure. This discomfort was so common it was rarely noted. It was expected. You feel your own breath moving more slowly now, warmer after hours of shared heat. Each inhale brings familiar scents that keep you grounded in the moment. A small detail recorded in some household notes reveals how people tried to manage nighttime air. Bundles of herbs were sometimes hung near sleeping areas. Not strong enough to hide smoke or dampness, but enough to add a known note. Lavender, rosemary, tit. These were believed to calm the body and prevent illness. Historians disagree on how effective this was, but the intent is clear. People sought control where possible. Even a faint pleasant scent offered reassurance in a life shaped by necessity. You shift slightly and hear fabric brush against straw. The sound is soft, almost calming. At night, textures speak. Wool touches skin. Wood presses against bone. Nothing is cushioned by modern standards, but the body adapts. You are aware of breathing beyond your own. Others breathe differently, some shallow, some heavy. These rhythms overlap and drift apart, much like waves. The room feels quietly active, filled with subtle movement. From time to time, a heavier sound breaks through, a log settling in the wall, or wind pressing through the thatch. These noises remind you that the house is not closed off. It is in constant exchange with the outside. You begin to notice that smell and sound have almost completely replaced sight. Your eyes stay shut. There is no desire to open them. Nothing would change. Darkness has leveled everything. Thoughts slow even more. The mind stops sorting sensations and begins to wander. Scents blend together. Sounds soften into a low, steady presence. Scholars often debate whether medieval people experienced nights as longer than we do today. Without clocks or artificial light, time likely felt different. Sitting here, surrounded by scent and sound, you feel that expansion. Night does not hurry. It opens slowly. You notice how the body relaxes once it stops anticipating interruption. No alarms. No sudden brightness. Morning will come gently, signaled by sound and gradual change rather than shock. The smells around you lose their edges. They combine into something single. Shelter. Safety. Imperfect, but enough. A light chill moves through the room again as hours pass. Cold returns in cycles, reminding you that nothing here is fixed. Even warmth shared with others must be renewed. You breathe in slowly, then out. The air holds traces of the day, work, fire, food, people. Night gathers it all. Eventually, even this awareness softens. Sensation fades into the background. The room pulls away. The body settles more deeply. Smell and sound have done their part. They have taken the place of sight, guiding you toward deeper rest. And so you drift again, wrapped not in silence, but in the quiet presence of a world that never fully stops breathing. Time loses its sharp definition in the dark. You no longer feel it as minutes or hours, but as sensations that rise and fall, without clocks, without glowing faces or ticking hands. Night becomes something you experience rather than measure. The body takes over the task of tracking time. You sense when rest has been enough, and when it has not. When cold pulls you closer to waking. When warmth allows you to sink further. These cues replace the need for numbers. Medieval life depended on this internal sense of timing more than any external tool. During the day, bells organized time for entire communities. At night, they still mattered, but in another way. A distant bell might mark a prayer hour, carried softly across fields and rooftops. It does not demand action. It reassures you that the world beyond these walls still exists, that it continues even as you rest. You hear these sounds without fully waking. The bell fades quickly, absorbed by distance and darkness. Its echo lasts longer in thought than in air. Inside the house, there are no clear signs of passing time. The fire is out. Candles are gone. Shadows have no meaning. What remains is the slow rhythm of shared breathing among sleepers. That rhythm becomes the clock. You notice how hunger feels different at night. It does not arrive suddenly. It whispers. Evening meals were eaten earlier on purpose, to avoid cooking in poor light. By now, hunger is a distant feeling, dulled by sleep and cold. It can wait until morning. Thirst, however, becomes clearer. Dry air, smoke, breathing, and sleep combine quietly. Water may be nearby, but reaching for it requires effort and alertness. Many choose to wait rather than risk moving in the dark. Several personal records note that nighttime thirst was common and often endured until dawn. Comfort was balanced against danger, and danger usually won. You feel the house respond again to changes in temperature. Wood tightens with a soft sound. Thatch shifts overhead. These noises are familiar enough to be calming. They remind you that the building shares the night with you. Some early medical texts make an interesting note. Physicians observed that the human body behaved differently at night, becoming more sensitive to cold and pain. Whether this was careful observation or assumption is still debated. But the experience feels convincing as you lie aware of every pressure point and ache. Your body changes position slowly, testing comfort. Staying too long in one place brings stiffness. Movement is careful and efficient. Each adjustment is followed by stillness, as if the body pauses to judge the choice. Outside, the night deepens. The air cools slightly more. Moisture settles. In winter, frost thickens without sound. In warmer seasons, dew forms on leaves and roofs. These changes go unseen, but they shape the world you will meet in the morning. You briefly think of those who must stay awake: guards, watchmen, bakers preparing early bread. Their nights are different, requiring alertness and effort. For most, however, night is about endurance, not productivity. Historians do not fully agree on how often medieval sleep was interrupted by discomfort. Some argue it was frequent. Others suggest familiarity reduced its impact. Your own rest suggests a middle ground. Sleep breaks, but it holds. The body adapts. You drift in and out again. Time stretches and folds. Dreams blend into waking thoughts. Waking thoughts slide back into sleep. There is no clear boundary. At some point, you sense a shift in the quality of darkness. It remains dark, but feels lighter. This change is not visual. It is atmospheric. The night feels less settled. Dawn is nearing, even if unseen. Birds are still quiet, but the world feels ready. The long pause before morning has begun. Your body notices before your mind does. You breathe more deeply, preparing for movement. Muscles loosen. The cold feels less sharp. The hardest part of the night is over. Time, which once felt endless, now seems to have passed without effort. This is the quiet lesson of medieval night. It teaches patience by removing options. You remain still, letting the awareness settle. Morning will come on its own. You do not need to call it. For now, you rest in this in-between state, guided by breath and sensation rather than clocks or light. Even in the deepest hours of night, work does not disappear. It changes form. It becomes quieter and more selective, but it does not stop. You sense this as subtle movement passes through the darkness. Careful and deliberate. Somewhere nearby, someone rises slowly, testing the floor with bare feet before shifting weight. The sound is almost nothing, yet in the stillness it carries. This is not restlessness. It is responsibility, moving gently. Some tasks cannot wait for daylight. Fires must be checked. Bread must be prepared hours before dawn. Animals must be settled if they stir. Night work exists because life does not pause when the sun sets. Records from medieval towns show clearly that bakers often worked through the night, especially in larger communities. Bread required time. Dough needed to rise. Ovens demanded long heating. Morning loaves depended on labor done in darkness. While most slept, a few kept the rhythm of the day moving forward. You picture the baker's space now. Dim, warmed by the oven, thick with the scent of grain and yeast. Hands move by memory more than sight. The motions are practiced enough to trust in low light. Errors here are costly. Flour is valuable. Fuel even more. Watchmen also claim the night as their duty. They move slowly through streets you cannot see, calling out the hours. Listening for sounds that seem out of place, their voices offer comfort as much as caution. They serve as reminders that someone is awake. Someone is paying attention. Town regulations provide clear evidence that nighttime patrols were considered essential. Even in small settlements, risks like theft, fire, and unrest increased after dark. This was not because people were more likely to commit wrongdoing, but because darkness slowed response and made damage harder to contain. You develop a quiet respect for those who remain awake. Night requires greater focus than daytime. Tiredness feels heavier without light to guide you. Every noise must be judged. Every shadow inside the home must be considered. Smaller duties continue as well. Someone keeps embers alive so they last until morning. Another ensures doors stay locked. These tasks are quick and purposeful. No one stays awake longer than required. A lesser-known detail appears in monastic schedules. Monks regularly rose during the night to pray at fixed hours. Their rest was intentionally interrupted, regardless of season or weather. Darkness was seen as an appropriate time for devotion, free from distraction and sound. Historians still debate how harmful this practice was to physical health. But the purpose is clear. Night was not empty time. It was structured by duty and belief. You notice movement again, closer now. A figure passes quietly. A blanket is adjusted. A child's breathing is checked. Care does not stop simply because people sleep. Work done at night has a different quality. It feels more personal, less for display. Actions are carried out only because they are necessary. There is no audience and no reward, only completion. You remain still, watching without being noticed. Night teaches this as well. To observe without interrupting. To share space without asking for attention. Outside, a distant sound carries briefly. It could be a voice. It could be wind. It disappears before you can decide. The watchman moves on. The street grows quiet again. Scholars continue to debate whether medieval people resented nighttime duties or accepted them as unavoidable. Some texts suggest irritation. Others show calm acceptance. Your own sense leans toward acceptance. This is simply how life is arranged. The person who rose earlier settles back into rest. Bedding shifts. Breathing returns to a slow, steady rhythm. The interruption is short and easily absorbed into the night. Work has been done without display. Nothing appears different. Yet something has changed. Preparedness has been maintained. Risk has been managed. Morning has been quietly prepared. Sleep returns more firmly after these small disruptions. The body understands that watchfulness has been handled by others. Responsibility has been shared. Darkness remains, but it no longer feels inactive. It feels sustained by unseen effort. This awareness brings subtle reassurance. You sink deeper into rest, knowing that even as you sleep, life continues its careful movement through the night. Fire never stops being a concern, even when it is nearly extinguished. In fact, it may be more dangerous than at any other time. You lie aware that the greatest nighttime threat does not come from darkness itself, but from what darkness can conceal until it is too late. Earlier, fire brought comfort. It offered warmth, light, and reassurance. Now it represents quiet risk. A single ember can survive longer than expected. A spark can travel without sound. A poorly placed coal can smolder unnoticed until wood begins to burn internally. This awareness is constant in medieval life. Town records, household rules, and local laws all show deep concern about nighttime fires. Entire streets could disappear before dawn if a single hearth was mishandled. Once night fell, the ability to respond quickly dropped sharply. You sense this tension in how the fire was managed earlier. Logs were spread thin. Embers were checked carefully. Ashes were smoothed and contained. These actions were not routine habits. They were protective measures learned through loss. Legal records show that many towns enforced curfews not only to prevent crime, but to reduce fire risk. Fewer people moving meant fewer open flames. Less activity meant better attention. Night was already dangerous without adding carelessness. You imagine narrow streets outside, wooden buildings packed tightly together, dry thatched roofs ready to burn. A single flame could jump from house to house faster than anyone could react. Darkness would only worsen the damage by slowing response. Inside the home, the threat feels more immediate. Bedding rests near where the fire once burned. Clothing hangs close by. Nearly everything you own can burn. You now understand why people slept lightly, not only because of cold or noise, but because part of the mind never fully rests while fire exists. Some household instructions preserved from the period reveal just how constant this concern was. Families were advised to keep water nearby at night, even when fires were low. Buckets, jugs, anything that could slow a spark long enough for help to arrive. Historians still debate how common nighttime fires actually were. Some argue they were rare due to careful practices. Others point to the number of fire-related laws as evidence of constant danger. Lying here now, those laws feel reasonable. Fire demands respect at every hour it exists. You listen more closely. Alert to subtle sounds, a crackle where there should be none. A shift in heat. A faint smell of smoke that feels unfamiliar. The nose learns to tell danger from routine. The body remembers stories. Someone you knew who lost a home. A street rebuilt after a blaze. These memories guide behavior more strongly than rules ever could. Night amplifies these concerns even after embers fully fade. Worry does not vanish. Residual heat remains. Ash can hide sparks. The hearth stays warm long after flame disappears. People learn to treat it like a living presence that only truly rests when morning arrives. You notice how this alertness exists alongside deep fatigue. Bodies are tired. Minds seek rest. The balance between caution and surrender is fragile. Too much alertness prevents sleep. Too little invites disaster. Scholars disagree on whether this constant low-level awareness harmed long-term health. Some believe it increased anxiety and poor rest. Others argue it became background noise, absorbed into daily life. Your own experience suggests both are true. The concern remains, but it no longer controls everything. The house creaks again, and your body tightens briefly before relaxing. Not fire, just wood adjusting to temperature. The difference matters. You learn it over time. Outside, night continues, indifferent to human concern. Wind shifts. Air cools. Fire is a human problem, created and managed, but never fully mastered. In wealthier homes, additional protections exist. Stone hearths raised from the floor. Chimneys that carry smoke more effectively. Servants assigned to inspect fires during the night. Even so, risk remains. No building is immune. In simpler homes, caution replaces structure. Attention replaces technology. People learn to notice early signs. A smell. Heat where it does not belong. Night sharpens this awareness. You settle once more, trusting that the fire has been controlled for now. This trust is not careless. It is built through repeated checks and habit. Sleep deepens slowly. The part of your mind that listens for danger pulls back slightly, though it never fully disappears. It rests lightly, alert but calm. As hours pass without incident, confidence grows. The night has passed another test. Fire has stayed contained. Shelter remains intact. This ongoing negotiation shapes medieval life deeply. Darkness alone can be endured. Cold can be managed. Fire, however, demands constant respect. You breathe steadily, allowing this awareness to fade into the background where it belongs. Vigilance has served its purpose. For now, safety holds. And so, you rest again, knowing that with morning, fire will return to its role as ally rather than threat. For at least another day, you lie awake in darkness, understanding its influence more clearly. Light is never equal here. Who has it and who does not shapes life. Comfort, safety, authority, opportunity. In poorer homes, night comes unchallenged. Firelight fades quickly. Candles are scarce, and darkness is simply endured. Wealthier households experience night differently. Not with brilliance, but with control, extra candles, larger hearths, thicker walls. These advantages do not banish night, but they temper it. You imagine a large house nearby, stone walls instead of wood, several rooms instead of one, servants moving silently with small, carefully shielded flames. Light flickers, but it lasts. Darkness waits at doors rather than filling every corner. The difference is tangible. More light reduces stumbles, injuries, and fire risk. It allows reading, writing, planning after sunset. These small advantages accumulate. Household inventories of the time often listed candles and fuel alongside other assets. Light itself was wealth, counted, stored, shared. Those with more of it lived differently at night. You feel how this imbalance shapes behavior. In humbler homes, night signals retreat. Movement slows, activity narrows. In wealthier ones, evening stretches. Work continues. Conversations persist. Decisions are made. Urban records even show curfews applied differently by status. Some could move after dark because they could afford lanterns or torches. Light gave permission. Darkness imposed limits. The divide extends beyond homes. Streets near wealthy quarters are better maintained, patrolled more often, fires controlled strictly. Poorer areas exist closer to risk, nearer shadows. Night reminds those without light of their place in the world. Darkness is not only natural, it is social. Yet sleep brings a form of equality. Once candles are extinguished and fires dim, everyone lies in the same dark. Wealth cannot banish cold or silence every sound. Night humbles even those who command it best. Historians debate whether shared vulnerability softens social divisions or simply highlighted inequalities. Lying here, you sense both. The rich may delay darkness, but they cannot escape it. Churches offered a different form of light. Candles burned through the night at altars. Sanctuaries glowed faintly when homes went dark, signaling protection, presence, and order. Access to these spaces mattered. Not all lived near enough to benefit. For some, the church bell alone reminded them of such light. Night is steady and impartial. Darkness answers only to flame. Sleep shifts around you. Someone moves, another turns. Bodies adjust to warmth. These small movements ignore status entirely. Historians suggest night may have offered subtle resistance to hierarchy. When vision fails, voices soften, roles blur. Perhaps people felt freer in thought, if not action. Silence equalizes. Without sight, authority loses sharpness. Commands soften, presence matters less. Darkness flattens social edges. Yet fear reinforces hierarchy. Those with resources feel safer. Those without feel exposed. Night magnifies both comfort and anxiety, depending on what you hold. The house around you functions imperfectly. Walls separate you from the street, roofs block wind. These protections exist everywhere in some form, though unevenly. Eventually, thought fades. Night encourages rest, not analysis. The body draws attention. Breathing, warmth, stillness, light, or its absence, shaping movement, work, fear, and rest. Night exposes difference and shared vulnerability alike. You drift towards sleep, accepting this imbalance without fully understanding it. Morning will restore clarity, night blurs it just enough to allow rest. Darkness settles evenly, touching every home with the same quiet hand. Night in a castle is different. You sense it immediately. Thicker walls, larger spaces, silence heavier. Darkness does not press in as in a small house but pools in distant corners and corridors beyond any single flame. You move through stone passageways, sound behaves oddly. Footsteps echo, then vanish. A cough travels farther than expected. Even breathing seems louder. Castles are built to intimidate and defend. At night, this is clearer. They feel less like homes and more like watchful bodies holding their breath. Torches are placed deliberately. Not everywhere, only in intervals known to the residents. Light guides insiders, not strangers. Castles were never intended to be brightly lit at night. Light exposes movement, darkness can be advantageous. The night belonged to those familiar with its spaces. Heavy iron-reinforced doors stand closed, dividing zones of privacy and security. Sleep is not uniform. Status determines access to protection and proximity to danger. Guards remain awake, their presence felt even unseen. Positioned near gates, towers, and walls, their duty is patience, long hours punctuated by brief, focused attention. Night requires endurance beyond daytime, tested by fatigue, cold, and uncertainty. A guard failing at night risks everyone inside. Military manuals note nighttime vigilance as both difficult and honorable. From the battlements, darkness spreads over fields and roads. Distant village fires flicker, then fade. The castle stands elevated, aware of its power and vulnerability. Inside, night rhythms continue. Servants move silently, carrying covered lamps, knowing creaking stones, mastering silence. Sleeping arrangements reinforce hierarchy. Lords and ladies rest in protected chambers with fires tended through the night. Yet stone remains cold, indifferent to status. Drafts find their way through narrow windows and arrow slits. Blankets are heavy, clothing layered. Even wealth cannot tame the chill entirely. There is debate among historians about how comfortable castle life truly was at night. Some accounts highlight luxury and safety, while others emphasize constant discomfort and isolation. Walking through these corridors in the dark, the truth seems to fall somewhere in between. Castles offer protection, but not ease. Every sound carries meaning. A distant clang, a murmur behind a door, a guard's quiet call to another, each noise seems purposeful. Even when it is not, the mind fills in the gaps quickly. One can imagine the uneasy sleep of those who lived within these walls. Power did not guarantee peace, it often brought anxiety. Threats were real, enemies existed, and night intensified every danger. Candles are extinguished carefully, and fires reduced to embers. The castle dims, yet never truly sleeps. Vigilance is distributed across many, not borne by a single person. Some chronicles note lords pacing their chambers, unable to rest. Decisions made in daylight echoed at night. Darkness stripped distractions away, leaving only consequence. Stone retains memory. Footsteps, whispered secrets, even silence. The castle seems to listen. Eventually, movement slows. Guards shift less frequently, cold settles into the stone, and silence thickens. Yet beneath the stillness, readiness persists. Weapons are at hand, doors secured, eyes alert. The castle cannot fully relax. Sleep here is light, threaded with awareness. Rest itself becomes strategic. Throughout the night, stone and shadow hold together until dawn returns, sharpening purpose again. In the absence of light, sound measures time. Ears stay attentive even with closed eyes, ready to notice the smallest change. Somewhere beyond the walls, a bell rings. Not urgent, but steady. It is not a call, only a reminder that time moves even in stillness. Church bells divide the night into segments, marking prayer hours as sunrise and sunset structure the day. Even those who do not rise to pray are aware of this order. Monastic schedules show bells ringing punctually, regardless of weather or season. Monks rose to chant prayers in cold stone chapels, their voices filling spaces that otherwise belonged to night. The Latin prayers did not chase away darkness, they existed within it. For those outside, bells still mattered. Farmers, townspeople, travelers, all recognized the passage of night. A bell's sound registered even in half-sleep, signaling another hour passed. Other sounds carried meaning too. A watchman's call, a distant knock, the creak of a gate. Town ordinances required watchmen to call the hours, preventing fear. Silence bred anxiety, sound reassured. A simple voice in darkness reminded people they were not alone. Inside homes, subtle sounds continued. A sleeper murmurs, someone turns, straw shifts beneath weight. These noises form a low rhythm, familiar yet alive. In medieval nights, without clocks or electric light, sound became the main sense for orientation. Hearing replaced sight as the primary guide. Some communities left doors or shutters slightly open, not for air, but to hear better. Complete silence could feel dangerous. Listening became as important as locking. Scholars debate whether this constant auditory vigilance increased stress or sharpened awareness. Experiencing it now, alertness comes without anxiety. Sounds inform, they do not overwhelm. As night deepens, sound changes. Earlier, more interruptions, movements, occasional voices filled the night. Now, everything slows, deliberate. Animals quiet down. Then gradually, patterns shift again. A bird stirs, another answers. Not full song, only a tentative call. Morning approaches, though darkness remains. The air itself seems ready for movement. Inside, sleepers stir more. Bodies sense transition before minds. Night does not end suddenly, sound signals its gradual retreat. Bells continue, birds call, distant human activity resumes. Listening has guided you safely through uncertainty. Soon, light will return, but for now, sound remains your guide. Illness feels different at night. Discomfort that seemed tolerable in daylight feels heavier after dark. Pain sharpens, breathing labors, every sensation is amplified. Night removes distraction, leaving sensation and thought. Medieval medical knowledge was limited, yet observations were precise. Sickness often worsened after sunset. Cold irritated lungs, smoke thickened breathing, fatigue reduced resistance. Those who were ill were closely monitored at night. A hand rested on a fevered brow, a blanket adjusted, breathing listened to in the dark. Vigilance increased when the body weakened. Household records describe sleeping arrangements around the sick, closer to warmth, closer to attentive hands. Privacy mattered less than survival. Care was communal. Pain also changed in stillness. Without movement or conversation, it dominated attention. A tooth throbbed, a joint ached, a fevered heat persisted. Night heightened awareness of the body, sound guided understanding of the world, and care demanded attentiveness. Darkness shaped life, attention, and survival. Through it all, castles, monasteries, and homes endured, each stone, each wall, each sound bearing witness to the night. A wound pulses. The mind lingers on these sensations, unable to escape easily. Historians debate whether medieval people feared illness more at night or simply accepted it as part of life. Some texts reveal deep anxiety about sudden nighttime fevers. Others describe calm endurance. Lying here now, you feel both. Concern exists, yet panic is rare. This is familiar territory. Night also brings uncertainty. If someone worsens, help may not arrive immediately. Healers are asleep. Roads are dark. Decisions must be made quietly. Sometimes without guidance, this reality sharpens awareness of fragility. You listen to breathing nearby, counting rhythms unintentionally. Each inhale brings reassurance, each pause invites tension until the next breath comes. Night trains patience for those who care. Across regions, there was a curious belief that illness spirits were more active after dark. Whether literal or symbolic, this shaped behavior. Prayers were spoken, charms placed near beds, words of protection whispered softly. These acts offered comfort, even if they did not cure. Modern scholars remain divided on their psychological impact. What is clear is that action, even symbolic, reduces helplessness when medicine provides little. Cold complicates illness. Shivering drains energy. Warmth becomes treatment itself. Blankets are layered. Bodies huddle together. Fire is coaxed briefly if embers remain. Heat is applied carefully, never wasted. Sleep for the sick comes in short stretches. Discomfort interrupts rest, yet rest remains essential. Caregivers balance vigilance with allowing sleep, a skill learned through experience, not instruction. Night stretches longer when illness is present. Hours feel heavy. Time seems reluctant to move forward. Prayer bells feel distant, almost irrelevant. Focus narrows to the body and its struggle. Personal letters show that nighttime illness created vivid memories. People remembered these hours far more clearly than daytime events. Exhaustion settles over those keeping watch. Shoulders slump. Breathing slows. Even concern tires eventually. The body gradually demands rest. The illness stabilizes, at least temporarily. Breathing evens. Pain dulls slightly. Nothing is resolved, yet nothing worsens. This small improvement feels significant. You relax marginally, letting sleep return. Awareness softens but does not vanish. Night continues, yet its grip loosens. Illness reveals another side of darkness. Intimate, demanding, not dramatic. As rest deepens, you trust the routines that have carried people through sickness for generations. Warmth, watchfulness, and time. Morning will bring clearer sight and renewed options. For now, endurance is the remedy. You lie quietly, breathing steadily, letting night pass without struggle, waiting for light to ease what darkness has magnified. Animals become more noticeable at night. You sense them rather than see them. Movements, sounds, and smells sharpen against the quiet. Livestock shifts in nearby stalls. Chickens murmur softly. Even rats and mice announce themselves through tiny scuttles. Night and medieval life are shared with creatures of all sizes. Records show animals required constant attention after sunset. Horses and cattle needed monitoring for safety and warmth. Birds and smaller animals had to be confined. Any lapse could mean loss, injury, or worse. Night heightened interdependence between humans and animals. Scent guides understanding in the dark. Earthy livestock smells, straw, and damp would mark boundaries. You know where animals are resting, feeding, or moving without seeing them. Monastic and agricultural texts note certain animals, owls, cats, some rodents, were believed more active at night, whether naturally or symbolically. These beliefs influenced how sleeping and working spaces were arranged. You notice livestock breathing, the occasional shuffle of hooves, or the clatter of a disturbed trough. Each sound is interpreted quickly, some reassuring, some demanding attention. Night teaches acute listening. Beyond the household, wild animal sounds travel farther. Foxes, badgers, and deer move through fields and forest edges, their presence known more by sound than sight. Travelers learned to respect these cues. Night outside is never empty and requires caution. Your body responds to auditory cues. Muscles tense at new sounds. Eyes shift under closed lids. The mind weighs possibilities. Heightened sensitivity blends instinct with learned behavior. In medieval life, ignoring signals could have consequences. Scholars disagree on fear of animals at night. Some stress real danger from predators. Others suggest perception of threat was amplified by darkness and imagination. Sitting here, you understand both. Every sound matters, yet not every noise signals peril. Movement in the dark is deliberate. Small adjustments avoid disturbing animals. Bedding shifted carefully, footsteps softened, hands steadying humans or pets. Sleeping arrangements consider animals' location, balancing warmth and safety. Animals also contribute to heat. A dog curled at the foot of the bed or a cat on a chest adds warmth, reduces drafts, and offers comfort. Medieval texts describe night watch over animals. Shepherds, stable hands, even children sometimes had tasks to ensure animals remained calm. These duties teach patience, attention, and awareness of the environment beyond immediate human needs. Human and animal rhythms synchronize. A hoof scraping, a tail brushing a wall, a bird stirring, all define the night alongside human action. Outside, forests and fields remind you that civilization does not dominate darkness. Predators and scavengers claim space. Travelers moving after sunset negotiate these zones carefully, relying on instinct and experience more than light. Chronicles note animals served as warning systems. A dog barking, a rooster crowing early, or cattle movements could indicate strangers or weather shifts. Night amplified the value of these instincts. As you lie in bed, warmth, presence, and movement lull you further into rest. Animal life becomes part of the rhythm, alert yet reassuring. Darkness, cold, and human care coexist with these creatures, shaping the night. Ignoring animals is not an option. Awareness protects both you and them. Sleep comes easier, threaded with quiet reassurance that life continues beyond your stillness. Humans, animals, and darkness coexist, influencing one another in delicate balance until morning. Traveling after dark in the Middle Ages demanded caution, patience, and sometimes courage. Imagine stepping outside your home onto roads and paths that disappear into darkness beyond the reach of fire or torchlight. Every step carries risk, not only from uneven terrain, but also from unseen strangers or hidden hazards. At night, familiar landscapes transform into uncertain spaces. Medieval travel guides repeatedly stress the importance of preparation. A traveler might carry a small lantern or torch if affordable. Maps were rare. Travelers relied on memory and recognizable landmarks. Roads twisted unpredictably, and shadows cast by trees or hills could mislead even the most experienced. Limited vision forced travelers to depend on memory, intuition, and sound. Darkness shaped decisions. Some routes were avoided entirely after sunset. Dangerous bridges, forest trails, or poorly guarded roads became nearly impassable. Travel required careful planning, departing to cover distance in daylight, or seeking the safety of inns, monasteries, or fortified towns. Records suggest that certain nights were considered more hazardous than others. Storms, full moons, or the absence of stars could influence both mind and body. Misjudging a step or bend could result in injury, getting lost, or falling victim to crime. Night turns the ordinary into the uncertain. Picture walking along a narrow road. Boots crunch against frost or loose gravel. Every sound is magnified. A snapping twig could signal a deer or a hidden person. Wind carries sound unpredictably. The mind becomes alert, scanning constantly, recognizing that instinct matters as much as sight. Some communities employed night guards or mounted patrols along key routes. Their presence offered reassurance, though coverage was inconsistent. Travelers often relied on their own skills to navigate safely. Urban records describe watchmen calling the hours from city gates, signals that reinforced order and warned of potential danger if ignored. Anecdotes describe travelers using animals for guidance or protection. Dogs accompanied lone walkers, alerting them to movement and marking territory. Horses were kept close and well-fed to ensure escape if necessary. Even a rooster or barn cat could provide cues that influenced movement. Historians debate how common attacks truly were. Some suggest the risks were exaggerated, amplified by fear and folklore. Others cite court records documenting theft, assault, and highway robbery as evidence of real danger. Even if attacks were rare, the perception of risk influenced behavior strongly. Weather added another layer of complexity. Rain, snow, and fog reduced visibility and made footing treacherous. Paths became slippery, rivers swelled, and hills turned into deceptive shadows. Travelers adjusted pace and routes constantly to manage uncertainty. A simple misstep could have serious consequences. With no consistent lighting, even short distances seemed longer. The mind stretched time. Each step became deliberate. Speed was dangerous. Patience became a form of safety. Night also shaped social behavior. Villagers stayed indoors, curfews enforced stillness, and strangers were met with suspicion. Travelers moved mostly unseen, interactions were brief, and conversation was minimal. Noise was carefully controlled, every action measured for stealth and safety. Chronicles mention travelers carrying charms, prayers, or protective words, not purely for superstition, but for psychological reassurance. In low visibility, a sense of security mattered. All these elements, terrain, sound, animals, patrols, weather, human behavior, interacted to transform travel into an exercise in vigilance and resilience. Every choice had consequences. Awareness became both protection and burden. Despite risks, people traveled at night out of necessity, for commerce, urgent messages, or personal duties. Such journeys demanded skill, careful planning, and experience. Mistakes were costly, but experience built instinct. Imagine the rhythm of this night walk: measured footsteps, pauses to listen, adjustments for unseen obstacles. The body and mind work together, guided by memory, caution, and alertness. Light is scarce, sound constant, darkness dominant. By the time rest comes, it is deeper, the hours of heightened awareness past. The house or inn offers warmth and safety. Night has been navigated and negotiated successfully. Even the darkest hours yield to preparation, vigilance, and endurance. Law and order persisted through the night, shaping behavior subtly. Curfews regulated movement, gates were locked, watchmen patrolled streets. These measures maintained structure in the absence of light. Footsteps echo on cobblestones, distant calls remind sleepers someone is awake. Silence communicates as much as sound. People moved cautiously, aware that attention was distributed even when unseen. Urban ordinances required locking doors and securing windows by a set hour. Penalties varied, but the principle remained: darkness could not become lawless. Night was both natural and socially regulated. Rules influenced behavior. Movement slowed, chores were completed before sunset, social interaction decreased. Even storytelling became quieter, near the hearth where households could monitor themselves safely. Rural areas observed similar curfews, often enforced socially rather than formally. Night had to be acknowledged, respected, and contained. Subtle sounds, a gate creak, a door closing, distant footsteps, reflected shared understanding of nighttime order. Even silence had meaning. Quiet streets suggested compliance, sudden shouts indicated transgression. Scholars debate compliance. Some argue it was high due to consistent enforcement and social norms, Others note necessity sometimes overrode regulations, justifying late travel or work. Fear and pragmatism coexisted. Nighttime law shaped perception, darkness magnified consequences. A misplaced step could seem threatening, shadows could appear dangerous. Awareness trained attention, giving significance to minor sounds or movements. A hierarchy existed within these rules. Wealthier individuals could secure homes, afford lanterns, or hire guards. The poor relied on social norms, luck, vigilance, and personal security. Darkness emphasized inequality while limiting freedom for all. Noise management became a form of social order. Communities enforced quiet indirectly. People adjusted behavior naturally. Animals contributed too. Dogs barked selectively, alerting to strangers. Restless livestock signaled environmental changes. Humans and animals formed a network of observation beyond individual senses. Curfews, locks, and vigilance influenced psychology. People slept lightly, monitored actions, and structured sleep around social necessity as much as biology. Imagine a traveler arriving at a town after dark. Gates might be closed, entry allowed only at designated times. Watchmen scrutinized every approach. Rules ensured safety but also defined privilege. Night created boundaries daylight obscured. Historical debate continues. Did these measures reduce crime or manage perception? Some records suggest fewer incidents after curfew, others indicate underreporting. The combination of law and fear clearly shaped behavior within homes. The same principles applied outside. Night limited movement, reduced noise, and structured daily routines. Even children quickly learned that activity after sunset carried implicit risk. Darkness instilled discipline, framing consequences subtly. By the middle of the night, the impact of these social systems is evident. Streets lie empty. Fires burn low. Doors are locked. Animals rest. Sleep resumes. Order continues, maintained through habit and restraint rather than constant enforcement. As you settle in, it becomes clear that law, social expectation, and nighttime vigilance together create a distinct environment. Darkness is not chaotic. It is guided by rules, upheld by attention and routine. Life continues within these limits. Yet underlying tension remains. Awareness lingers lightly through sleep and consciousness. Night is calm but potent. Social order persists in the shadows, shaping every step, every movement, every thought. You breathe slowly, sensing how structure, expectation, and careful observation allow the night to pass without incident. Human effort, regulation, and attention combine to hold darkness at bay. Sleep returns, guided by understanding and habit. Night continues, shaped as much by social practice as by darkness itself, carrying life toward the approaching dawn. Storms, however, change this balance. They arrive without warning, transforming night into more than a mere inconvenience. You lie awake, listening to wind clawing at thatch, rain striking shutters, and distant thunder rolling across the landscape. Darkness amplifies every sound, making its source ambiguous and demanding attention. Medieval people quickly learned that nocturnal storms required vigilance unlike daytime weather. Visibility disappears. Even familiar paths turn treacherous. Roofs leak. Fires risk extinguishing. Rivers swell unseen. Preparation and awareness are essential, and mistakes can be dangerous. Inside, the household responds. Sleep becomes lighter. Movements slow and deliberate. Someone checks doors. Another adjusts fire coverings to prevent sparks from escaping. Each action balances protection and survival. Records from rural areas show that storms could disrupt entire villages after sunset. Livestock needed shelter. Stored grain required care. Weak structures risked collapse. Minor disturbances, a dislodged roof tile, a fallen branch, became hazards magnified by darkness. People learned to read storms by sound. Rain striking thatch differs from stone, signaling potential danger. Wind direction indicates whether shutters need reinforcement. The body becomes attuned to cues daylight might obscure. Shadows deepen under storm-darkened skies. Flickers from fires appear more noticeable, both reassuring and urgent. Fire management is protective, balancing warmth and risk. Even small embers require monitoring, as gusts could spread them unpredictably. Storms affect social behavior as well. Villagers stay indoors. Streets empty quickly as clouds block moonlight. Noise softens into cautious murmurs. Movement slows except for guards, watchmen, or those attending to animals and supplies. Scholars debate the psychological impact of nocturnal storms. Some argue repeated exposure builds resilience. Others suggest chronic stress disrupts sleep and heightens anxiety. Experiencing it now, the mind sharpens, yet rest becomes fragmented. Animals respond differently during storms. Horses shift uneasily. Cattle shuffle. Dogs grow restless. Their behavior alerts humans to subtle changes. This interplay reinforces collective awareness, linking all inhabitants to the storm's rhythm. Folklore often reflects this, incorporating storm behavior into warnings or moral lessons. Stories of spirits or omens during night storms emphasize the vigilance required. You adjust position instinctively, seeking warmth, avoiding drafts, and moving carefully. Sleep comes in brief intervals, interrupted by sound or shifting temperature. Outside, night feels vast and indifferent. The storm obscures familiar terrain. Trees sway unpredictably. Rivers murmur or roar where dry land is normally solid. This uncertainty reinforces caution. Darkness and storm conceal hazards, while inside, households maintain order. Candles are lit sparingly. Embers are stirred carefully. Walls and doors are monitored. Routine, vigilance, and small adjustments guide survival. Storms also influenced nighttime rituals. People turned to prayer when control seemed limited. Spiritual practice offered reassurance alongside practical preparation. Sleep, when it comes, is light but restorative. Bodies respond to subtle environmental cues, maintaining vigilance even while resting. Dreams are shaped by sound, warmth, and intermittent movement. Consciousness and environment remain linked. Eventually, storms lose intensity. Rain softens, wind slows, thunder fades. Darkness remains, but the threat diminishes. Night resumes its rhythm, governed by habit, awareness, and endurance. By now, the skill embedded in these practices is evident. Night, storm, and darkness do not paralyze. They teach observation, caution, and adaptation. Every household member contributes to managing risk. Vigilance is a communal act. You breathe slowly, allowing body and mind to relax. Darkness remains but is manageable. Survival depends on instinct, learned behavior, routine, and attention to subtle cues daylight rarely demands. Sleep deepens. Awareness softens. Night is no longer an adversary but a condition mastered through experience. Storms eventually yield to human persistence, letting darkness pass with minimal disruption, preparing for morning. Winter nights bring additional challenges. Darkness arrives earlier and lingers longer. Days shrink. Nights dominate nearly half of every 24-hour cycle. Cold intensifies. Air sharpens. Time seems to stretch. Houses respond. Thick walls retain heat, releasing it slowly. Hearths require careful attention. Embers are stirred frequently. Blankets are layered strategically. Shared sleeping becomes necessary, as individual bodies alone cannot generate enough warmth. Historical records show that winter required foresight. Firewood was gathered in advance. Food stored for quick preparation. Water sources protected from freezing. Night offered no mercy. Preparation was essential. Cold dictated daily routines more than any calendar. Sleep changes. Long nights break into phases, separated by waking for temperature, thirst, or tending animals. Interruptions are expected and efficient, checking embers, adjusting bedding, moving quietly to avoid chilling. Village records describe layering clothing in bed, leaving outer garments on to preserve warmth. Shoes and hats remained nearby. This added bulk restricts movement but conserves life. Outside, frost thickens unnoticed. Snow may accumulate. Rivers freeze at edges. Familiar shapes, trees, hills, houses, become deceptive. Movement grows riskier, demanding knowledge, instinct, and caution. Those venturing outdoors faced uncertain terrain, constantly balancing the need to stay warm against physical exertion. Animals played a critical role in survival. Livestock needed shelter, food, and regular attention. Even small animals, like chickens, required protection from frost. Their warmth contributed to the comfort of indoor spaces, but only if properly cared for. Cold heightened the interdependence between humans and animals during winter nights. Historians debate how medieval people perceived long winter nights. Some sources suggest these nights heightened awareness of mortality, while others indicate a sense of acceptance, adaptation, and routine. Imagine lying awake, adjusting layers, and listening to the house settle. Both perspectives hold truth. Fear existed, but it was balanced by skill, experience, and daily practices. Fire management required particular care. Winter air was dense, cold, and unyielding. Hearths needed constant attention to maintain heat over long periods. Embers were nurtured carefully, and fuel rationed to provide warmth without waste. Smoke often built up in poorly ventilated spaces, irritating eyes and lungs, though it could not be entirely avoided. Social interaction changed during long nights. Conversation was limited to conserve warmth. Stories were short, practical, or comforting rather than playful. Movement was deliberate, even laughter restrained. Nighttime activity mirrored the efficiency of daytime labor. Winter darkness also influenced diet. Heavier, calorie-dense meals, porridge, stews, and preserved meats helped compensate for the cold and long hours of restlessness. Cooking at night was minimal to conserve light and fuel. Even nutrition was guided by the demands of darkness. Human ingenuity was evident in every adaptation. Every layer of clothing, shared bed, and carefully managed ember reflected planning and adjustment. Night was not simply endured, it was negotiated. Sleep returned, often interrupted by discomfort or instinctive vigilance. Bodies huddled together, sharing warmth. The household functioned as a network, with humans and animals supporting each other's survival. Outside, the winter landscape was silent but vivid. Snow muted sound, making distant noises sharper. Ice cracked quietly, and wind howled over roofs. These cues guided movement, alertness, and timekeeping. Medieval people would have interpreted them instinctively, moving with practiced attention. Bodies adjusted repeatedly to preserve warmth. Arms folded differently, legs positioned for insulation. Even minor discomforts were managed consciously. This subtle, continuous labor ensured survival. Modern historians remain divided on the psychological effects of long winter nights. Some highlight stress, fatigue, and anxiety, while others emphasize community, routine, and ritual as stabilizing factors. Experiencing the night, one senses both realities, the awareness of hardship alongside the comfort of shared endurance. Hours passed, embers faded, and breath became the dominant sound. Movement slowed. Through preparation, cooperation, and careful attention to body, fire, and environment, the long night was survived. Darkness became predictable, not threatening. Dreams began to emerge as night deepened. Without artificial light, imagination expanded freely. Minds conjured landscapes, memories, and possibilities. Shadows, movement, and textures took prominence in ways daylight never allows. The unconscious mind filled gaps left by limited sensory input. Sounds and shapes acquired meaning, and stories from memory surfaced, sometimes altered or amplified.